Welcome. My name is James Orbinski. I'm the director of the Dahdaleh Institute for Global Health Research. And today we're delighted to host the second presentation of the Dahdaleh Institute's 2022-23 Seminar Series in Global Health. And this seminar series showcases our global health research in the fields of, according to our three themes, which are planetary health, global health and humanitarianism, and global health foresighting. And if you want to see the scheduled events for the rest of the seminar of the semester, just visit our website to take a look, and particularly look at the events page. Today's seminar is led by Mark Terry, and Mark is the seminar itself is titled the Planetary Health Film Lab 2022, Filmmaking with Indigenous Youth from Ecuador. Mark is a research fellow here at the Dahdaleh Institute, and he's also adjunct professor here at York, and a very well-known documentary filmmaker and a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. Mark's films throughout his career primarily explore the human impacts on environment. He has attended virtually every UN climate summit since 2009, and he's presented his environmental documentaries there. He's also presented the films that he has assisted in making and or curated from young filmmakers from around the world. As a project co-lead of the Dahdaleh Institute's Planetary Health Film Lab, Mark has trained and worked with youth from India, Canada, Italy, Colombia, Ecuador, Australia, and throughout the Arctic. The Planetary Health Film Lab is an interdisciplinary program culminating in an intensive week-long workshop that's designed to provide participants with the knowledge, the skills, and the tools that are used in making short documentary films for the United Nations. The 2022 edition of the Planetary Health Film Lab was offered this past summer to 16 Indigenous youth from Ecuador who had a story to tell about climate change and health. Their films were produced in the indigenous languages of Quechua and Shuar. And these films are used in the Youth Climate Report, which is a digital database that Mark has created over the years. And it is adopted for the COP conferences by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Mark will share details about the filmmaking process in this year's Planetary Health Film Lab in Ecuador, and about the film festival that was held at the end of the workshop that showcased the 16 short films that were made. He'll also discuss his plans to present these films at this year's UN Climate Summit, COP27, in November. Do you want me to give a summary, Mark, of the seminar, or should we just let that emerge?
Yeah, you can probably just let it emerge.
Yeah, okay, good. So before we actually begin the formal seminar, I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement. As this is a hybrid event, some guests are on different territories. So please take the time to give thanks and respect to the land on which you are currently living and working. So I would just like to acknowledge that today we are on York University campus in Toronto, and we're situated on the traditional territorial area known as Takaranto. And we acknowledge its current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and we also acknowledge that this is the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and of course the Métis. This territory is the subject and subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So with that land acknowledgement, I'd like to just give a very quick outline of the seminar process. It's a 1-hour seminar. We'll start with a 20-minute presentation by Mark, and this will be followed by about a 25 to 30-minute Q&A at 12:30. And we will conclude at, I'll wrap up at 12:55, and we will finish sharply at 1 o'clock. So the other thing I just want to ask people to do is please mute your microphone unless you're actually presenting or asking a question or answering a question. And please use the, if you can, use the raise hand button on your screen if you're attending virtually to ask a question. And just remember that the seminar is being recorded, so try to minimize your movement. It makes a big difference to the actual recording. So let's begin, and I'm delighted to turn the floor over to Mark. Mark.
Thank you, James. Hi, everybody. Everybody that's actually physically here, and everybody that's virtually here as well.
Mark, could you move the microphone closer to you because we're having trouble hearing?
All right. Is that any better?
That's much better.
Great. Thank you. So, greetings, everybody. I'm very delighted to share this report of this year's Planetary Health Film Lab with everybody here. And let's get right into it. The first picture we have on the first slide is, let's call it a graduation ceremony. This is following the film festival where everybody was given their certificate of completion by completing the Planetary Health Film Lab this year. And you see all our participants there. And standing beside me on the right are our two partners that are based in Quito, Ecuador. That's the first picture. So just give you a little bit of background. The Planetary Health Film Lab is now in its 3rd year, and it's a research project co-led by James Rubinski, Kate Tilichak, Deborah McDonald, and myself. In the months of May to August, filmmaking training sessions via Zoom are provided, and participants begin to collect interview footage and B-roll for their respective films. Participants produce a documentary short film profiling planetary health issues in their communities. Now, the week-long workshop educates participants in the areas of planetary health, global environmental policy participation with the United Nations, professional documentary filmmaking, youth empowerment, digital storytelling, and land-based solutions in Indigenous communities. Each film produced in the program is submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change for consideration to be added to the Youth Climate Report. That's a digital database of videos produced by the global community of youth. The database now has close to 700 films, and those added this year will be presented at COP27 in November. I'll tell you more about that later. The Planetary Health Film Lab was originally funded by a SSHRC grant and is now supported by the Hunter Family Foundation. This year, we had 16 Indigenous youth from communities across Ecuador. Their films were made in the native languages of Quechua and Shuar, and this is important because 2022 marks the first year of the UN's International Decade of Indigenous Languages. These ancient languages are Incan in origin and are rarely spoken outside of only a few West Coast countries in South America. And those are our participants, once again, standing in front of a giant logo for our partner university, EPN, celebrating the fact that they completed their films. So let's talk a little bit about the workshop. With our local partners, the Escuela Politécnica Nacional University and the Pontifical Catholic University of Ecuador and the Quechua Academy of Humanities, we were able to secure camera equipment, including drones, and a post-production suite complete with 26 professional iMacs valued at $10,000 each, and a selection of editing software ranging from Apple's very basic iMovie to a very sophisticated professional software known as Adobe Premiere Pro. The first 2 days of the workshop featured presentations in English, and translated into Spanish and Quechua, and were presented both in person and via Zoom in the production lab. The English language speakers for the first 2 days were myself, based in Ecuador, and I spoke about documentary filmmaking and digital storytelling. And then Charles Hopkins, based here in Canada, he's the UNESCO chair for reorienting education towards sustainability, and he spoke about youth engagement with the UN. Gigi Staffney from the USA, who spoke about plant-based solutions for planetary health. And Carter Kirilenko, who was based in South Africa, and he spoke about impact producing for Indigenous communities. And then finally, Jim Stinson, who is with us today. Hi, Jim. He spoke about decolonizing planetary health. So you see, we had a very good range of topics and places around the world. And finally, Debbie McDonald and Pablo Aranguiz Messias from Spain, who spoke about youth empowerment. So those were the first 2 days. So for days 3 and 4 of the workshop, all presentations were held in person in the EPN lecture hall. You can see in this picture here, that's the lecture hall, and the participants in the faded background are sitting there. The 3-hour sessions ran from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. each day. Translation services from Spanish to Quechua and Shuar were provided for the participants to engage in discussions with the speakers. Participation for all 4 days was 100%. Now here are the speakers that we had on days 3 and 4. Yaku Perez spoke about environmental law and indigenous rights. I should note here that Yaku was a presidential candidate last year. He didn't win, but he ran for president. Then we had Zenaida Yasakama, and she's an indigenous leader. She spoke about environmental issues in indigenous territories. And then Arari Ruiz, who is the director of the Quechua Academy of Humanities, spoke about environmental politics. Julio Ukelema, he's an indigenous economist, and he spoke about the economic impacts of planetary health issues. And finally, we had Sofia Luzariaga. She's a professor at the Pontifical Catholic University, and she spoke about environmental history in Ecuador, and those are pictures of all the speakers below. So let's just give you kind of an overview of the production schedule so you can get an idea of how this works. We begin in May when the participants are assigned to the project. They begin experimenting with camera equipment, shooting 1-minute videos of themselves and landscapes. So they become familiar with camera equipment. Some of them have never touched a camera before, let alone even seen one. So this was an important part of the process. In June, participants attended a series of Zoom training sessions specific to documentary film production. And not just any documentary film production, but the kind of style and content that the United Nations is looking for during the COP conferences. In July, participants arranged for interviews with elders in their communities, as well as those most impacted by changes in their environment, climate, and land. Some participants researched experts in these fields from outside their communities and arranged for Zoom interviews with them. Later in July, participants created shot lists based on interview transcripts and went to locations to shoot items on these lists. That's how you get the B-roll. And then in August, participants brought their footage to Quito, traveling by bus from across the country. Some traveled by bus for up to 4 hours. They checked into their hotel Sunday, August 14th, and began the workshop at EPN University the next day. August 14 to 18, that's our workshop week. Following daily presentations in the morning, participants edited their films in the afternoon under my supervision until about 8 p.m. every evening. August 19th, the Micro Film Festival is held, representing the first public exhibition of the participants' films. They answered questions from the audience and were given certificates of completion. September, participants produced Spanish transcriptions of their films and worked with the CEC Language Center of EPN University to translate their films into English. These English scripts are then used for the creation of English subtitles for their films. That's what they're currently working on. In October, once the English versions of the films are available, they are presented to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change for approval. Once approved, they are added to the Youth Climate Report digital database on the UNFCCC website. In November, the films are presented as a series of side events, press conferences, and pavilion exhibitions during the UN Annual Climate Summit known as the COP Conference. This year, COP27 is taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So, a little bit about the Microfilm Festival. There's the poster they created. I think they did a wonderful job of that. So, first of all, it kicked off with an opening ceremony. It was called an Indigenous Shakana blessing. And then we had the EPN dance group who performed a number called Re-Energizing. This was a symbolic performance that was put together to symbolize how the Indigenous communities are re-energizing themselves by making these films and sharing them with the world. Welcome messages from myself, Arari Ruiz, Sandra Sanchez, and EPN University President Flornella Munoz. Then we had a special film presentation by a local environmental documentary filmmaker named Apak Piragachi, and his film was called Runa Dwellers of the Mountain. It was only 6 minutes, but it was a good opportunity for the Indigenous people to see a professional filmmaker from their own communities and films he made. Then we showed the Planetary Health Film Lab films, all 16 with their filmmakers. And after that, there were certificate presentations. Now the attendance, there were 150 people in person, and virtually there was another 530 that attended through the live Facebook broadcast. So we had good representation, probably the best we've ever had in the Planetary Health Film Lab. And these are just some pictures of the filmmakers at work. I just selected 6 of them because they have these nice pictures with cameras. So it gives you an idea of where they were shooting and how they were shooting and the different equipment they were using. Everything from a DSLR all the way to their cell phones. So there were quite a few cultural ceremonies, as you can imagine. We began the workshop week with something called a circle ceremony. You see the first picture here. We're all standing in a circle, and we're being led in prayer around this newly emerging palm tree. And of course, the symbolism there is that as the tree is beginning its journey of life, so too are the participants in the workshop. On day 5, we had something called Aknanya. This is a traditional meal of celebration, and again, this is an Indigenous ceremony/meal used for celebrating big achievements in the community. And then, as some of you may have seen, there's a special ceremony called the Blessing of the Films that took place at the beginning of the film festival. And what you'll notice on the ground there is lots of rose petals and fruit. And after the prayers were said, each piece of fruit was handed out to everybody in attendance. That's part of their way of sharing the participation of the film, so they're not just observers. So the Planetary Health Film Lab themes that James mentioned earlier, they all made films within one of these 3 themes, planetary health. Several films addressed this theme by depicting the land as being sick and connecting their relationship to the land as affecting their own health. For example, droughts contribute to a lower yield of crops and therefore less food for the community. Global health and humanitarianism. Other films recognized how their stories could assist other Indigenous communities around the world, and they shared their experiences and solutions to improve the health condition of other global communities. Global health foresighting. Some films identify the causes of planetary health issues in their communities, pointing their finger at capitalistic interest in nearby mining projects. Local youth can be seen in these films mobilizing and planning to defend their land against these projects, and by example, encouraging other communities to do the same. Some of the logistics here. Our partners based in Quito, Ecuador, were able to establish resources, ground transportation, meals, and accommodations at greatly reduced rates and at times at no cost at all. The hotel, a nearby boutique hotel, the Chicana Hotel, provided private accommodation for all 16 participants and 2 organizers. Special university rates were only $7 US per room per night, including breakfast. Chicana, the name of the hotel, is a Quechua word that represents their belief that all 4 points of the Andean cross are connected at the core by to Pachamama, that's Mother Nature. Meals. In addition to the breakfasts provided each morning at Chicana, lunches for all participants, speakers, and organizers were provided free of charge by the neighboring university, Pontificia Universidad Católica del Ecuador. I always have trouble with that. And equipment and facilities. All camera equipment, including drones, classrooms, computers, and post-production facilities and software were provided by EPN at no cost. It was their investment in kind. I just thought I'd share some of the pictures of the accommodation so you know they were staying. As you can see in the top picture there, very nice beds, very nice rooms with indigenous art on the wall, so they felt very comfortable there. And this is the main lobby in the second picture. They're all gathered together after a day of editing. And then there's a rooftop deck that they can hang out on in the third picture there. And you see the mountains in the background. And they all had these little desks and chairs in the fourth picture you can see. And there was full Wi-Fi at all times available for them. And this is just a shot of the city from that rooftop deck I told you about. Facilities and equipment. These are some shots of where we actually did the editing. This is our post-production suite. So you can see all the iMacs in the top and bottom pictures on the left, and you see everybody working together on one iMac in the middle there at the top and the bottom. Now this is important because it shows how they joined together and collaborated with the others who weren't quite finished their projects yet. So the ones that finished early came to help out the others. So it was a very good spirit of collaboration. And then the last picture there on the right shows one of our lunch meals. And the guy in suspenders on the left, he's a priest that is the president of the Catholic University, and he's our benefactor that provided all these meals for us. In addition to learning everything they learned in the film lab and during the workshop from the presentations made, there were other educational opportunities, and they got to engage with those as well. We had a visit to the Museum of Natural History with an animatronic dinosaur there. We also visited the Geoseismic Center of Ecuador. This is the headquarters of any kind of seismic activity, either volcanic or earthquake related for the entire country. They found that fascinating. And then the National Art Gallery, featuring indigenous art such as this painting here. And you see a lot of the same themes come up in the artwork of the indigenous people of Ecuador. You'll see the city there represented with Pachamama in the middle, kind of being drowned out by the pollution and everything around her. The videos of the workshop, we recorded these every day. So if you wanted to see all the presentations that were made each of the 4 days of the workshop, I posted them here with these links so you can watch them if you like. So what the participants learned, let's go through a summary of all the things that they've learned here. They learned how to use camera equipment, editing software, and iMac computers. They learned how to make a documentary film and tell a story in this medium. They learned about planetary health issues and solutions in their own and other Indigenous communities. They learned how youth and Indigenous engagement can take place with the United Nations. They learned about plant-based medicines and other uses from North American Indigenous cultures. They learned about youth empowerment using film as a communications tool. They learned about decolonizing planetary health. They learned about environmental law and Indigenous rights, environmental issues and Indigenous territories, environmental politics and the influence of art, economic impacts of planetary health issues, environmental history in Ecuador, Ecuador natural history, and geoseismic monitoring to detect volcanic activity and earthquakes in Ecuador. So they had a very wide range of things to learn about this year's film lab. And finally, Indigenous art in Ecuador. What the organizers learned, we learned stuff too. We learned that the consistent theme that emerged in the films was that the planet is sick, poisoned by capitalistic interests in nearby mining projects and deforestation of the Amazon jungle. This illness is represented by unsafe drinking water, reduced amounts of water in local rivers, and poor crop production with smaller and less produce. We also learned that WhatsApp is a powerful and easy-to-use tool preferred by participants for instant communications with each other. Separate group accounts were set up for participant, organizers, and both. Video samples and rough cuts were also shared through this social media quickly and easily. So we really stayed connected at all times in a very easy and productive way. We also learned that partner universities bring a wealth of resources, both material and human, to the Planetary Health Film Lab. Contributions in kind were significant, with access to post-production labs and filmmaking equipment, free lunches every day for all participants and organizers, substantial discounts on accommodation through the university's established hotel connections. Quickly, the results. Number of participants at the beginning of the program were 16. Number of participants that completed the program, 16. Number of films produced, 16. Number of certificates of completion issued, 16. Number of entrance surveys completed, 16. Number of exit surveys completed, 16. Attendance at all workshop presentations, 100%, 15 in person and 1 virtual. Languages of finished films, there were 4, Quechua, Shuar, Spanish, and English. Preliminary analysis, engaging with each other in person rather than Zoom exclusively yielded a high rate of participation and collaboration among participants and allowed for ancillary educational opportunities such as visits to planetary health related places like natural history museums and environmental monitoring stations. A detailed analysis is still to come following a review of the entrance and exit surveys. At the completion of our workshop, the communications department of EPN University put together this little video report. Most of it is in Spanish, but I thought I'd share it with you.
La Escuela Politécnica Nacional fue sede del taller y del Festival de Laboratorio de Cine sobre Salud Planetaria.
The Planetary Health Film Lab is a research project that comes out of York University. There's a very specific institute at the university called the Dahdaleh Institute for Global Health Research. And the idea of the Planetary Health Film Lab is to train young people in indigenous communities and remote communities throughout the world how to make short documentary films to inform and influence the policymakers of the United Nations.
Los organizadores del laboratorio fueron la Escuela Politécnica Nacional, la Universidad York de Canadá y la Academia Quechua de Humanidad, que contaron con el apoyo de la Pontificia Universidad Católica del Ecuador. Chaimandami, Yukanchi Tiaupa, Runakuna, Ashtawan Hatarishpa, Katina Kanchi, Chinayata, Yukanchipa, Yachalpunapa, Chushu Yatakunama, Apashpa, Katishpa, Purishpa, Katina Kanchi, Yukanchi Tupurispi, Yukanchi Mana Hatarispi, Yukanchi Mana Rimaspi, Kaitisimuyu Tupurinka. 16 jóvenes indígenas de Ecuador fueron seleccionados para participar en este laboratorio. Ellos tuvieron 90 días para realizar la preproducción, el rodaje y la postproducción de sus trabajos.
Y estas producciones tienen la finalidad de llegar hacia los tomadores de decisiones la COP27, la Conferencia de Cambio Climático, que este año será en Egipto.
Los films tratan sobre ambiente, salud humana, cambio climático, seguridad del agua, seguridad alimentaria, entre otros.
El lunes pasado, mientras inaugurábamos esta jornada, recordábamos las potentes figuras y el papel que desempeñaron Francisco Maguaña, Dolores Zacuanco, Nela Martínez, mujeres que gestaron cambios a través de su accionar en la representación de sus comunidades. Hoy tenemos la oportunidad de presentar las necesidades de la comunidad indígena, como lo hicieron estas mujeres, pero con recursos de un alcance universal.
Los cortometrajes estrenados en la Escuela Politécnica Nacional se publicarán en los sitios web de la Convención Marco de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Cambio Climático, del Instituto Dahdaleh y en el informe sobre el clima de la juventud. También serán presentados en la Cumbre Climática de las Naciones Unidas que se llevará a cabo en Egipto en noviembre de este año.
Okay. Where to see these films? All 16 films with Spanish subtitles have been uploaded to the Youth Claim Reports YouTube channel. English subtitles are expected on or before the end of this month and will be uploaded to the same channel. These films will be sent to the UNFCCC for approval and uploaded to the Youth Claim Report database, and the films can be seen here. So there's the link for it. And take a picture with your phone or whatever. Remember that? Now, going forward, James mentioned that there's going to be some presentations at COP27. So yes, November 6th to 18th, a new pavilion for youth has been established for the very first time at the COP conferences. And we have applied to make a presentation there showing all 16 films. It's called the Children and Youth Pavilion. And a press conference will showcase one of the films and provide a link to all the others and a press release to the media. On November 1st at 4:45 p.m., a side event presenting the Planetary Health films has been scheduled as part of the annual conference of the Planetary Health Alliance at Harvard University. I'll be there speaking at this event in person. And finally, this is kind of interesting. This just happened a couple of days ago. This is the Lancet. To celebrate their 200th anniversary, the Lancet will be producing 7 videos of key stories they've identified. One of them is the Planetary Health Film Lab. I've been asked to help produce a video on the Planetary Health Film Lab's Ecuador edition with Lancet editor Rose Worrell. All right, we talked a lot about what happened and how it happened. You probably want to see one of the films. It's only 3 minutes long, so if I can be indulged a little further, I'm going to share one of the videos with you. Thank you, Teresa.
Primera vez para 30 años cuenta acá. Chaypika kushnika tutandi puljandi nina kushnika na yoshi hopi impactante karian amma chay mapa mundo naresta rico y yuka paka yaki pacha karian Europa tikasa. Unang kay pachapi causai que momento causai pica que tarpo y conapika ungo y alita pacha yakichina por ejemplo punaka toka variedad papa conata jadi kariachi kai yukachi yakta pinishu kai agato urko kunapipas papa taka tarpo karianchi Okuchi karianchi pero kunambika ya papa taka ya datar production kai fábrica kuna factoría chay sisa tarpo chay yaki mapa si contaminación químico kuna tukuiladuma afectan kankashka soberanía alimentaria nishka porque kay lancha ungui midinan hatu ungui ka
les falta polvo y el polvo se va todito al tanque de agua y está contaminado ese.
¿Qué podemos hacer? La manera más eficiente y barata de poder mitigar gases de efecto invernadero no es plantando árboles. Y eso es lo que hacemos.
Yukanchi alpa mamama mangakuti paipa kushihuima paipa yachima paipa karaima tigraspa y tigretika jikuspa yatizandi yukanchi paipa tigrachinata yana kanchi karaipunawan kushi tarpuipunawan Danate semuyu kunata piña chispa, chiru kunata tarpuspa, kutin yukanchi pang alpa mama, hui matira nata yana kanchi.
And there we have it. That concludes the presentation. Thank you very much, everybody. Whoops. I promise it's over. Yeah. So I'm eager to hear any of your questions or comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. And my first comment is a regret that I just was unable to be there. Timing and so on, as you know, it shifted and all of that, so it just wasn't possible for me to be there. But seeing some footage from the workshop, boy, I wish that I had been able to be there because it looks like it went really well. And so, number one, congratulations on a really successful Planetary Health Film Lab for this year, and it shows very clearly. That it's evolving, it's growing, it's learning as a lab, as a process, and from my perspective, last year was good, but this is great, and so congratulations on the learning as well, and just making it that much more focused and that much more deliberate about the parameters that within which you operate, and then the very functional sort of things you want to do. So giving people an opportunity to learn a little bit more about some of the broader issues, connect to each other, and build broader communities of practice and around certain issues, and then the very technical skills that are required for filmmaking. At this level, and also very specific kind of style, for that is oriented toward the COP process and the COP community. So it's from my perspective, it's just those general comments. It's great to see that growth and that kind of evolving clarity and specificity about what it is that the Film Lab is trying to do. And then the other thing that I really liked as well, was the very explicit focus on health And it's like, this is a, it's a global health research institute, right? That's what it does. And it, by definition, is, transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. But the perspective is on the issue of health, right? And whether it's the health of individuals, the health of our biosphere or ecosystems, and the interrelationships that influence and shape health, that is the focus. So I'm really glad to see that the lab has really kind of honed in on that in a much better and more kind of obvious way. And then the last thing I'll just say, I mean, I have a lot of questions for sure, but the last thing that I'd really like to say is that it's really wonderful to see, that very concretely, an institute and an institution, quote unquote, like the Dahdaleh Institute at York University, can very meaningfully and very practically engage with partner institutions and very vulnerable and very marginalized communities in ways that are substantive, and also in ways that can reach to the very highest policy echelons. And that's exactly, from my perspective, as the director or the director for this institute, that's exactly what I wanted to see happen, not just within the Planetary Health Film Lab, but within every single project that we do. So I'm really, really delighted, Mark, to see that. And again, I just say congratulations to you, on a great film lab this year, and on great learning and great growth. So I'm just delighted to see that.
No, thank you, James. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it was a great experience on all levels. Not just myself and the other organizers down in Ecuador, but the participants as well. All their families came out to the film festival, for example, right? And they were able to engage with each other. We have to remember that they all come from different communities throughout the country. And so there's different cultures and traditions that they're able to share with each other. So from that perspective as well, it was quite successful.
I have a question.
Yeah. Hi, Shauna.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? I think I have a microphone.
Not really. If you could maybe move the microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. No, I was just interested in hearing about the expression of sick as kind of that term that I guess a bunch of the participants used to talk about, I guess, what we frame as planetary health. And also there was a moment in the video where there was an equation of disease, but the disease was actually referencing pollution. So I'm wondering if kind of the concepts that you brought with you resonated with them as much as some of those concepts.
Yes.
But in particular, I'm interested in decolonizing, if they actually adopted that term and that approach to any of the issues they were addressing, and also planetary health in particular, if those two concepts like resonated with them, or if they started to kind of adopt them over time, or if they had their own ways of maybe talking about the same issues.
Yeah, well, this concept of Pachamama is the way they refer to the planet. They anthropomorphize an awful lot of nature. So trees can get sick, Pachamama takes care of those that are sick, and sometimes because of the ecological connection between the people and the planet, that there sometimes Pachamama needs the help of the indigenous people to provide medicine and treatment of these illnesses that they're experiencing. And they see these things like poor crop production and the corn not looking like it should and that sort of thing. They see that as symptoms of a larger illness. And what they appreciated from what we brought there was our three themes. You know, the planetary health theme, the global health, and the foresighting. They saw these as valuable touchstones to do their work from and to do their study from. And it also informed them to tell their stories using those themes. So I think they really appreciated that. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, Jane, Tim, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, huge congratulations. That presentation was great, and the program looked like it was, yeah, as James said, really amazing experience. So yeah, huge congratulations.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah.
I have lots of questions I could go through, but one of them was similar to the question that Shauna just asked. It was around Indigenous conceptions of nature. You know, one of the things we've talked about, and I presented a little bit at the Planetary Health Film Lab, was this idea that the framework for planetary health education that the Lancet and Harvard published last year identified sort of Western and colonial concepts of nature as sort of one of the root causes of planetary health and climate change and environmental degradation, and promotes the idea that we need to move beyond that and accept more inclusive ideas in relation to the environment in order to build more sustainable futures. So yeah, I was interested in the same question that Shauna asked about how that may have came out in the films, sort of Indigenous conceptions of nature in the films, but also wondering if there were any particular solutions that came out of the films in terms of ways to address those issues of sickness that may have been rooted in Indigenous cultures, for example. That was one question. Another question I had was just, what would you say are the main, you know, if you were presenting a summary for policymakers at the UN about this film lab, what would you say are some of the major takeaways or themes or issues that really came out of the films that would be important to highlight?
Well, I think I'll answer the second question first, but I think the important thing that the rest of the world needs to know, not just the UN, but everybody else, are the specific and unique problems that are impacting these communities. Because they are so remote, they are not necessarily studied by scientists or academics, and they're not usually reported on by the media. And so the real value of these films is presenting those issues possibly for the very first time. And in the medium of film, visible evidence of these problems are being presented. And that's even more important than statistic-ridden scientific papers sometimes, right? Where you can actually see the tiny corn kernels and understand how serious this problem is. Their relationship to the environment has really nothing to do with colonialism. They have lived on their own and developed a relationship with the planet that is somewhat traditional, as we understand, with Indigenous communities. But they also find ways. You were asking for specific solutions. Well, they treat a problem that they identify in their environment with other environmental treatments, if you will. So, for example, their own health. For their own health, they have certain plants and certain flowers and things that over the years they've learned to turn into medicine and treat themselves with it. And when they see things like the crops not surviving, mainly because of climate impacts, they are trying to use some of these land-based solutions to solve those health problems as well. So they don't really draw a line between the health of the planet and the health of the person. they kind of see this together. And I think that's a very, very interesting and healthy way of looking at that relationship, because that's what ecology is. You know, like, we rely on the planet and the planet interacts with us. The whole reason we have climate change crisis is because man's anthropogenic influence, right? So there's definitely a connection between the two, and they see that somewhat organically. Cool. And your presentation was great, by the way, Jim. There was lots of talk about it afterwards with the participants, so yeah. Thanks for doing that.
So, Mark, I have a questions similar to
Yeah.
similar to Shauna's question. You put up the phrase decolonizing planetary health as one of on a list of other points. What does that mean?
Well, that was Jim's presentation, and he spoke a lot about how not to have necessarily the colonial experience of dealing with planetary health issues brought into Indigenous communities. Instead, the other way around, so that colonial institutions, if you will, can learn from the land-based solutions and the natural solutions that have taken place over centuries within these communities, bringing them to the scientific table, if you will, might provide some answers that have yet to be discovered. Jim, am I right in assessing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really huge issue, but some of the things we talked about in the presentation around colonization and decolonization included how the benefits from colonization and the global capitalist system are primarily experienced by wealthier groups of individuals, but the negative impacts of environmental degradation and climate change are often experienced by those who are poorest and those often least responsible for producing those environmental impacts. And really, one of the major themes of that presentation, and they were very short, again, because of the need to translate them, but we did talk a lot about that idea of concepts of nature, and how the idea and the concept of nature itself is a Western colonial term. It's rooted in the idea of nature as being something separate from humanity, often as a resource that can be exploited for human benefit. And that idea is often quite responsible for the degradation of the environment that has serious impacts on human health. And talked about how there's this movement, again, to recognize that alternative conceptions of nature that are often that we often see within Indigenous worldviews and Indigenous languages often have more of a reciprocal relationship to nature or the non-human world embedded within them. And also this idea that human health and environmental health are intimately connected is also something that's sort of often deeply embedded within Indigenous worldviews and languages. So we talked about how promoting those ideas and values is one of the ways to go about decolonizing planetary health, rather than devaluing those knowledges and worldviews and seeking to eliminate them. These are worldviews and values and way of life that we need to be working to support in the world today.
Yeah, I think, those things all make a lot of sense, and to me, and but I think one of my feelings is that the idea of decolonizing anything requires first that there is an explicit description of what is colonization, right? Like, what is that? And why is that a bad thing, right? And being really, really clear about that. And I think one of the things that I see, and I see a lot of kind of policy circles and, you know, all of that, is that, you know, it's become a buzzword. It doesn't mean anything, right? It has become a kind of another face, not even a face. It just means advocacy. You know, that's what it means. And anything that is quote unquote advocacy is now decolonization. You know, and decolonization is the new, sort of fancy word that people use. But there's in my mind, it's probably, you know, the risk that we face here is that it will become exactly what I've described. But that is a real danger because the term has incredible weight and incredible power to it that really needs to be articulated and in a way that is clear and is also actionable, right? And so it gives people something you can do. And I just say that because you know, the urgency that we are of the situation that this planet is in is really you know, like we are not going to be in the same situation that we are in today in 10 years. You know, it's going to be a hell of a lot worse, and that's inevitable. That is absolutely inevitable, and it's going to be that trajectory of impact is going to continue for a minimum of 30 years. That's what the science tells us. It's very clear. And even if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions today, there's a 30-year trajectory of accelerating climate change impacts. And so, you know, what does it mean to reimagine a way of being in relationship to ourselves, in relationship to the biosphere that makes us possible, right? Like we're not even possible. We can't even exist without our biosphere. We're just one of many life forms, you know. But somehow we have as human beings in the last 500 years, most especially within that over the last 250 years, we have developed a truly toxic perspective, and it's called colonization. You know, and now if we're going to shift that, you know, we've got to be really precise about that story, and really precise about what does it mean, right? And that I don't like much as I appreciate, you know, that this is a short presentation, you're covering a lot of material, Mark. I appreciate that, but I would just urge you, Mark, and you, Jim, particularly in your research and in your work, your articulation of these issues, to be really, really precise about these things, and don't beat around the bush, and don't let the fluffiness of the moment take over the clarity of your thinking and the clarity of the assertions that you're making, right? So I just urge both of you in your work now going forward, be very precise, you know, about what is colonization of whatever, planetary health, you know, indigenous peoples. What is that, right? What does it mean? And then in operational terms, what has it? What are the mechanisms? And then what are the impacts? What does it mean? And then what are the actionable decolonization interventions? And I think, anyway, I just throw that out there.
Well, thank you. Well, that's good. Good to know that. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm just keeping an eye on the clock, and I know you wanted to stop right at 1.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. I know the Hunter report is coming up, and this will be a very, very helpful in helping you put that together. So I'm delighted to see the outcome of the workshop, and then as well, would you mind just letting us all know, and especially Ryan, letting us all know when those translations are done with the English subtitles, and then reposting the link, and we can put those on the website. And then if you wouldn't mind also just circulating among all of us an email, just saying they're ready, the subtitles are there, because I would love to watch them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, if you
Again,
can't wait, you can watch them. Thank you. I was going to say, if you can't wait, you can watch them now, but they only have Spanish subtitles.
Yeah, I need the English subtitles.
Yeah. No problem.
All right. Okay. All right, Mark. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you, James. Thanks.
Fantastic.